Hi, welcome to Consider This, the show where we would like you to reconsider the news of the day. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad.
And today, one of the biggest news for me personally was the comments made by Perlis Mufti Muhammad Asri Zainul Abidin. He defended his remarks on preserving the Malays' cultural and political dominance. He suggested that Malaysia needs a strong, dominant leader like Saddam Hussein, and this is to keep the country from being divided.
Yeah, Melissa, I guess it's again one of those instances when people are jumping on this because of that headline that put Saddam Hussein next to Asri's ideas about political dominance. And I think that if we read the statement, at least it's reported more carefully, we perhaps might come away with a slightly different view about what the man is saying, because as you would have noted, Melissa, many people jumped on this and said, well, do we want a mass murderer? Do we want a man who is, who's known for his violations of human rights and democracy in his own country?
Right.
I mean, the late Saddam Hussein, of course. But if you listen to and read that article, Asri does in fact say, we never liked Saddam Hussein. He was just trying to make a point. It was an analogy.
Well, for me, one of the things that he said that caught my attention was the comment he said that sometimes in a place with a lot of gangsters, the leader needs to be one of the gangsters as well. Now, I'm just wondering whether that's true. So a lot of people, in response to this article, had kind of thrown history back, right, talking about Saddam Hussein. But I'm wondering what you think, Sharaad. Do you think that there's any element of truth in the fact that you need a strong man to keep the peace?
Well, I think, Melissa, it's really a question of your political ideology and what do you think are important as values. I think what Astri is trying to make an argument for is for kind of benign hegemony. I think when he reads Ketuhanan Melayu, at least it's been practiced over the last 50 or 60 years, he thinks of it as being rather benign. So it's dominance, but it's been accommodative. It's allowed everybody, as it were, to live with the recognition that Malay culture and political power must be central to the formula. Now, that's not something that sits well with Democrats who want to see the kind of radical equality that democracy often, promises, and radical equality that even citizenship promises. So here you have perhaps, an ongoing struggle as to the meaning of the nation state in Malaysia.
Well, the other kind of problematic area in this is how is this comment going to translate in Sabah and Sarawak? Because it's a very kind of peninsula-centric thinking, assuming that what's good for Perlis and the rest of Peninsula Malaysia is good for Sabah and Sarawak.
Right. In fact, political activist Peter John Jaban denounced the Perlis Mufti. And again, I think, it's one of those situations where Peninsula people often, as you put it, Melissa, kind of peninsula-centric or navel-gazing, just assume that the country is even across the Federation. Especially at a time when the two territories, Sabah and Sarawak, are pushing for the states' rights. So we're going to be talking, in fact, about MA63 and the implications. There's an affective level. Apart from the kind of legalistic issues and the constitutional issues, there's also a question of sentiment. Listening to Peninsula people speak in a way that excludes the realities of Sabahans and Sarawakians, I think, again, does nothing to help the country stay together.
That's right. So we are going to be looking at the progress made on the MA63 talks. But before we do that, I would like to give a little bit of attention to everyone's favorite controversial preacher, Dr. Zakir Naik. Now, he has apologized for causing any misunderstanding. This is after being questioned twice by the police for his alleged racial and religious remarks. Now, he said racism is evil and he denies that he is a racist as claimed. In fact, he's appealed to non-Muslim Malaysians to watch his speech in its entirety. Now, the problem is his apology was largely read as a non-apology. Why do you think it was?
Well, because in many ways, I think Zakir Naik didn't address some of the concerns that have been raised. And, it isn't just simply about racism. In fact, if you look and read Dr. Mahathir, the Prime Minister's statement, it's clear that the Prime Minister recognizes what Zakir Naik is doing is playing politics. The man has insinuated himself into domestic politics. He has chosen sides. He's gotten the largesse or the patronage of certain political actors. And that's really much more, I think, disturbing at the end of the day than the kind of comments that he's made that, have attacked this community, that community. And perhaps, even if you take a deeper look at, his position in or location in a kind of an Indian context, you might make the argument that maybe he is not racist as such, but he's playing politics, and race is so much part of the local, kind of language of politics.
Okay, well, I feel that he's dominated, enough airtime and headlines in this past week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It feels like it's been a long time. But the question is, what have we learned from this past weeks? Now, if we want to wrap this story up, and he's apologized and we accept his apology, generally speaking, what is it that we can say we have learned from this episode of this incident?
Melissa, there's also this other thing. The former IGP has come out to kind of denounce Zakir Naik, calling for his expulsion as well. I mean, a whole range of people. But I do think there's one thing we're kind of missing somehow, which is I haven't seen in the media any real investigations into the money trail. I mean, who exactly supports Zakir Naik and his organization? How big is it? Even if he leaves the country, does he leave behind a network of people that share the same ideologies and exclusivist ideology? What about all those other elements that will continue? What about his family? I think there are a lot of complexities to the story. It isn't simply about Zakir Naik at this point.
Not just about the one man. All right, in just a couple of minutes, we're going to take a closer look at MA63 and the progress made in talks. So stay tuned to consider this. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris with Sharaad Kutin. Now we turn our attention to the Special Cabinet Steering Committee on the Malaysia Agreement 1963, or better known as MA63. They have reached an agreement on 7 out of the 21 issues on Sabah and Sarawak's autonomy. Now they are expected to arrive at a decision on the remaining 14 issues by the end of the month. But joining us on the line to help us understand a little bit better what progress has been made so far, we have Professor James Chin, who's Director of the Asia Institute at the University of Tasmania in Australia. Good evening, James. Thank you for joining us. Now, how would you gauge the recent resolutions of the issues related to the restoration of Sabah and Sarawak's status as equal partners in Malaysia?
Well, I think the problem is obvious at that time. The legal system until the end of this month, which is 31st of August, to try to sort out all the key issues. But I think Larson in introduction, they've only managed to solve about 1/3 of the issues. Out of the 31 issues, they've only managed to agree about the constitution. So I think they will not be able to finish their work by 31st of August. It will probably drag up to probably until next year. The other reason why this issue probably cannot be resolved compared to the everybody is towards Sarawak regulation. So the Sarawak regulation is probably the next. So the GPS government will probably not agree with a lot of the key issues under any situation.
James, can I just go into some of the details that have been revealed to us with regard to the so-called progress? And it's got to do with gas distribution, labour and health, management, as well as the islands of Sipadan and Ligitan. I mean, are these significant in your view?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, this is just part of the process. The whole structure to try to resolve it is actually quite complicated. So here the main MA63 committee, which consists mainly of elected chaired by Prime Minister. Then below that you have the technical committee plus the state committee. Plus at the state level you also have 2 different committees, one is Sabah, one is Sarawak. So trying to get everyone together to agree on some of the more potential issues will be quite difficult. But I think that for people in Sabah and Sarawak, I think the most important thing that process is undertaken, because I think there was a bit of worry that under the new Pakistan system has done a lot of the issue. They might probably do the issue. But my understanding is that the federal government is quite serious about handling on this issue. The big problem is that there are the two state national coming up next year, plus the timeline which is exactly.
Okay, we'll just take a pause with James for a while, Melissa, and let's consider some of these issues, and I think because of the complexities of Sabah at least, we have a situation where the political party in power in Sabah, Warisan, is not actually formally part of Pakatan Harapan, right? They're not part of the Presidential Council. So there they are, Warisan. And I'm very interested to know from James if it's possible, and, whether Warisan takes the brunt of this, with the lack of progress, or, whether people are satisfied that, their government, as it were, Warisan is doing the most it can for the population in terms of the MA63 thing.
Yeah, well, you know what? We've got a by-election happening in East Malaysia just around the corner. We don't have a date yet, but it's going. We're going to be looking at a by-election soon in Kimanis,
right?
That's right. So the question is, how much will this play into the campaign? Are we going to be seeing this as a key issue in the campaign on the ground, or is it, Sharaad, just a question for political elites? I mean, is MA63 really followed by Sabah and Sarawakians on the ground? And the question is whether we can see this translate into kind of a grassroots support on the ground as well.
Yeah, in fact, we have from the ground, as it were, we have joining us Datin Faza Arif. She's in Keningau at the moment. And she's going to help us understand the kind of ground situation. So we had James just now, and he was, of course, in Tasmania because he's a long-time observer of Borneo politics. Now we have Datin Faza.
Faza Arif, thank you for joining us. Now, you helped form Moyog Magic for YB Jennifer Lasimbang in Penampang, which, it's about helping locals develop self-reliance through social enterprise. So what are you hearing on the ground about MA63 and Sabah issues?
Hi, first of all, thank you for including me in this conversation. Well, first of all, I'd just like to mention about MA63. Hello?
Yes?
Yes, please carry on.
Okay. I mean, the whole point of North Borneo, and now Sabah agreeing to Malaysia, was to be independent from the British, to maintain our status quo in terms of religion, culture, and land. And most of all, to have economic development and infrastructure to be almost on par, if not on par, as our counterparts in Malaya, for the people of Sabah. Now, MA63 had all those covered. The Malaysia Agreement 1963 had all those covered for the Sabahans. But it's now 2009, and as you all are aware, only some West Malaysians themselves are just beginning to wake up the existence of that agreement. But where would Malaysia be without Sabah and Sarawak? Because Malaysia was born on September 16, 1963. And where is Sabah now? Well, the biggest growth so far it had accomplished from 1963 until now had been the 400% approximately increase in its population. So the people are very, very aware of that.
Can I ask you if this issue of MA63 is actually central to the legitimacy of the Warisan government? I mean, if they are seen as not pushing hard enough, do you think they could last?
It is a very delicate issue for any party, but at the moment, Warisan has to be seen as to work really, really hard to push for it. But at the moment, I feel what we really need, what Sabahans really would like to see, would be more inclusivity of the government being more inclusive and also being more transparent of what they're trying to achieve, and who those people are at the task force, the technical committee fighting for MA63 for the people.
Right. So, your family is part of the political elite in Sabah. Your late father, in fact, Datuk Muhammad Arif Salif, was the first member of parliament from Keningau. And he was one of the first few political leaders to emerge from the interior during the formation of Malaysia. So the question really is, with the issue of MA63, just how big of a campaign issue do you predict MA63 will be in the upcoming by-election?
Well, I think before we talk about a by-election, I'm guessing there will be an appeal an appeal by Datuk Sri Hanifa.
And finally, I mean, are you personally happy with the progress of the talks? We know that there are 21 issues, 13 of them relate to both Sabah and Sarawak, and 8 are actually specific to Sabah. Do you think anything's been left out of off the table that you would like to see put on the table with regard to the federation and the relationships between the 3 territories?
Yeah, of course. We've always been saying that we are so behind in terms of education, Sabah, and also our infrastructure and all that, and. There are so many issues in Sabah that needed immediate attention, and whatever that has been achieved now is way back. It should have been done years ago for Sabah, but the thing is that for now, I feel that there should be more transparency, whatever the government is trying to achieve, and they should be more inclusive and get as many people, the top leaders in Sabah who had been working for Sabah in the past, who had been at the top positions in Sabah. They should be consulted as well, and the people. And at the moment, like I said, there's no apparent transparency or of them being inclusive with the general public. That's what the people are saying.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. That was Datin Fazal Arif, a Sabah-based activist. Now, we're going to be back in just a few minutes right here on Consider This, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris with Sharaad Kutan. Here's what we want you to consider tonight. Now, if you caught the show yesterday, we spoke to Youth and Sports Minister Syed Saddiq about his proposal, suggestion to push for motorcycle e-hailing services. Now, will this require a major change in consumer expectations? Or is this simply a matter of leaving it up to consumers to make up their own choice, their own minds? So let's take a look at the issues that are frequently brought up when it comes to motorbike ride sharing or e-hailing.
Right, Melissa, of course, one of the biggest issues is the question of safety, and this was also mentioned a couple of months ago by the Transport Minister, Anthony Loke, when he kind of turned down the idea of having motorcycle taxi services. And what's interesting is that I think this is a question that needs deeper consideration because of this. One, is it the fault of motorcyclists that there's such a high mortality rate with them, or is it just the conditions of the roads? The motorcycle lanes that are full of potholes, and are they constructed in the way to make them safe? And so we are putting the blame perhaps on the victims rather than on the people responsible for creating safety on the road.
Well, the job of the government is to regulate, right? So we want them to create a safe space on public roads. But the question is, Sharaad, yesterday on Sidek's Twitter poll, there was an overwhelming, I guess, support for, providing this kind of motorcycle e-hailing service as part of a gig economy, as a kind of a solution to unemployment or as a way to top up your income. But the question is, Sharaad, on the passengers' side, what will make you want to take it?
Well, I have, Melissa. I've had, not in this country, obviously, but I've taken, e-hailing in Ho Chi Minh City, for instance. I chose that over the cars because of the traffic situation. And I thought, it would be reasonably safe. I put my trust in a complete stranger. But I also know that there are initiatives, Melissa, around the world, where, especially in countries where this is really a common mode of transport. So across the African continent, there's, these things are called boda boda or okada in Nigeria. They're a popular mode of transport. And an app has been created, Melissa, to help improve the safety record of motorcyclists. So it's an app that helps both the rider but also the passengers. It monitors the way the rider rides and so on and so forth.
So what, in case too much swerving
and
or too
jerky
much
movements,
you could blame the potholes,
and also time, whether they're going too fast and so on and so forth. All these are technical problems that can be, and if those are there too, perhaps it will give give confidence to consumers. So maybe consumers might initially be hesitant to take this up, but in time, as we were, many years ago, if I remember, before the advent of e-hailing, or just as the e-hailing became big, people were hesitant, and now it's like the dominant mode of transport, at least for cars.
So some of the issues that were brought up, in terms of the hesitation when it comes to motorcycle ride sharing or e-hailing, was the question about gender violence. Could there possibly could there be an issue of close proximity? In fact, you might have to hold on to something on a motorbike, right? There's also, for me personally, would be the question of helmet hair. I wouldn't necessarily want to have helmet hair every time. But, the thing
is that a gendered issue?
No, that's not a gender. Men are equally concerned about helmet hair, I'm sure.
But because I have a helmet head, and I think, and perhaps, people like me won't be worried about, yes. But there you have it. There's also the question of the weather. Now, if you're stuck in traffic, but you're in a car, even if there's a torrential downpour, it perhaps matters not as much as if you were on a cycle. Then we look at the inadequate infrastructure for motorcyclists, all of whom have to huddle under a bridge if a bridge is available. And so, again, if this is going to happen and it's going to be done as a serious proposition for consumers and people who will take public transport, perhaps that kind of infrastructure has to be built.
Yeah, but that's not kind of short term, though. I mean, one of the biggest considerations would definitely have to be price. I mean, you're thinking perhaps this could be cheaper, but also congestion. If you live in an urban area, it's just so much faster to travel on a motorbike than it is to be stuck behind the wheel of a car.
Yes, but often motorbikes, Melissa, get away with negotiate the traffic by weaving in and out. Now, that's not safe, right? So again, we look at the motorcycle lanes and the provision of motorcycle lanes as a way of increasing safety and the convenience, as well as the speed in which that service is rolled out, as it were. But again, will we have to have those players who come into this segment of the market doing the pitch? They're going to have to convince consumers that this is safe, that it is, that their integrity will be intact at the end of the ride, and also that their hair will be intact. So it's a campaign, right, to change consumer behavior.
But first, convince the regulators that there is a room in the market for this and it is safe. So first the regulators, and then change the minds of
I've already
consumers.
had a word from the Minister of Transport, Anthony Loke, saying he's considering it. And yesterday on the show, Syed Saddiq said that he would be speaking to Cabinet tomorrow at the Cabinet meeting, putting this proposal forward. We'll hope to check in with him and see what kind of timeline does he have to roll this out if Cabinet approves of it.
So consider that tonight, for two-wheeled transport, would you get on board? That's all we have on the show today. I'm Melisa Idris with Sharaad Kuttan, and we will be back with you same time tomorrow night, only on Consider This.